And since this is the first meeting of the year, we do need to hold election for chair and vice chair. So at this point in time, I would take nominations for chair, and I'm going to actually nominate Jesse Rounds as chair. And if I could have a second for that.
Second.
So as the railroad has left the station here,
The railroad has already left the station. So is there any discussion on that? If not, could I have a vote, please? All in favor?
aye.
Aye. You're it, Jesse. It is now yours.
Oh, boy. Can I have any nominations for vice chair?
I would nominate Med for vice chair.
Can I get a second for that?
Gladly second.
You can't all say second. Any discussion on that?
Only that it could be temporary, but that's okay.
All right.
All right.
That being the case, can we get a vote? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So we have a chair and vice chair. Great.
Does that mean you have to go sit in the big chair?
No, I'm going to stay right here. Next item on the agenda is minutes from the previous meeting. I guess we just have to, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I would make a motion to adopt the minutes from December 8th, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion, any corrections?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have the minutes read verbatim.
Have at it.
They
Go for
only
it.
have an hour on
There
their
you go.
parking meter. We can't.
There you go.
I've read it, thank you.
All right. Seeing no discussion, can we get a vote to approve the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, unanimous. Okay, next item. Are there any conditional approvals we need to vote on?
This is Megan Fortson, planning technician. There are no final votes that need to be done today. And I just want to remind staff to please make sure you're turning your microphones on and off for the minute taker throughout the course of the meeting.
Thank you. All right, so now we are on to the public hearing portion of the meeting. And I guess do I just read the SPR, the language here?
Yep.
Can I steal it?
Where did I just have it?
Jesus. Thank you, sir. I can't think for myself. That's the problem. I need the script.
So did I, that's why I had it.
All right, so the first item on the agenda is SPR 204, modification number 3, site plan for 216 Marlborough Street. The applicant Randall Walter, on behalf of owner 216 Marlborough Street LLC, proposes to replace the existing vinyl siding with new vertical metal siding and install rooftop equipment on the building at 216 Marlborough Street, tax map number 589-016-000. The site is 0.97 acres and is located in the neighborhood business district. Does staff have a recommendation for completeness of the application? Sorry.
I apologize. The applicant has requested exemptions from providing a proposed conditions plan, an existing conditions plan, a location map, lighting plan, landscaping plan, and all technical reports. Staff recommend that the committee grant the requested exemptions and accept the application as complete.
Is there a motion to accept the application as complete?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Okay, I guess the next step is for you all to give us a presentation on the proposal.
Sure. So you've got a site plan on the screen. When we first introduced the concept, as I mentioned, there was Marlborough Street running left, right on the page. Downtown is therefore to the left of the site. Relevant to this conversation are some of the neighbors, including U-Haul across the street, and a number of, it's a bit of an edge condition. We have some residential properties to the David Ford, and other properties to the east. And so this, and then the site is bounded by the Beaver Brook on the east and north. So this, the primary reason that we ended up here today has to do with the siding. And included in that, though, we are working forward on some signage permits, which include both physical signs and equipment that is related to the business, KEB Mechanical Systems, that is the primary resident of 216 Marlborough Street. At this time, we're also identifying that there was siding done about 5 years ago that's kind of gotten swept into this. That was on the northern block of the building. The building basically is comprised of 3 blocks. There's a north block that has the blue mountain scheme that I believe was installed in like 2015, 16-ish. There's the new siding that's well described in the application on the southernmost piece, which is now a prairie scheme. As preliminarily depicted here, there were some edits, but conceptually it's the same. And then there is a little bit of remaining vinyl siding, perhaps appropriately facing the neighbor. But the vinyl siding is in bad condition on the front of the building. I believe damage from snow plowing and things like that was really quite architecturally inappropriate for the form of a building like this. Flat roof architecture and vinyl siding really aren't great. We did do some window replacement, again going with a commercial window as opposed to some out-of-date Anderson product that was on it. All those are the same. There's a theme you're going to hear over and over again. A lot of this work is the same as what it was, and we're simply trying to make this building more friendly and appropriate, and perhaps a bit colorful to compete with the visual impact of businesses like U-Haul. The other day I counted going by there, U-Haul has technically over 100 signs if you count every single vehicle that is clad 4 sides with logos. So it's a very busy visual area, and I think this is actually a lot more pleasant than having another, something like a car dealership. The precedent for vertical siding is a strong one. This was a Subaru dealership. The staff actually helped us dig out some archives from the 70s that show it was previously vertical. There was no permitting ever done for the vinyl, not surprisingly, and so we just want to go back to a more sustainable, more durable metal siding that's appropriate and consistent with, honestly, the neighborhood. There is metal siding on all of the buildings, a lot of the Kingsbury buildings, stretching all the way down to 310, for instance. So I think metal siding is appropriate and just a better choice. On other topics that are part of this, the first coat of paving has been repaired last summer, and that was done identical to what was there previously. It will see a top coat this year, but that's, again, no proposed changes. And after that, it will be striped according to the site plan sketch that we applied. I would call that more of a site diagram than a site plan. It is not a survey. It was done loosely from, it's an accurate representation of the building and the placement of the building. We do not have a boundary survey for this property, so that has been imposed from satellite images. And I believe the satellite images that we look at are different than what you may have access to, which may lead to some conversation about, is it closer to a neighboring building or not? But at this point, again, there's no changes. It'll get restriped to all the standards for ADA and the way it was before. So that's, the 2 curb cuts are staying the same. There's really no other changes proposed.
Thank you very much. Do board members have any questions for the applicant? This is not the time for deliberation. We're just clarifying questions. Anybody? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the questions I have is the site drawing.
Okay.
For
Diagram.
references to that, the diagram certainly is very different from what I'm seen on site and what actually I've seen from the 215 city aerials as far as pavement.
Okay.
One of my concerns is the impervious surface that you have listed is much higher than what is allowed in this district. And if I'm looking, and I did a calculation based off of the 215 aerials, I'm showing about a little over 25,000 square feet of impervious surface.
Okay.
I think where you're on your diagram, you had called out over 32,000 square feet of square footage.
We were simply trying to measure what's on that drawing.
Well, and that's part of my concern too, is I'm showing, on your drawing, is showing a pretty good grass belt on the back of this building, which appears that is slowly over the years been converted into outdoor storage, first with just gravel being placed out there. Now it appears that it's actually been paved as well. So I certainly have a concern about the amount of impervious surface that's been done on this lot, especially right near the brook, without possibly any sort of attention to any sort of stormwater issues. So I just, if the applicant could
So
speak to
our
that.
intention is to simply represent that we're, the same amount got paved. We were in here for siding. And so we didn't get a boundary survey, you know, we don't have that stuff. Is it, I think I could imagine that given the shape, different mathematical numbers would come up. Did you take this, did you take that? I simply did it as a percentage of the lot size. We can compare notes at some point if you want. I think the more impactful thing is that the paving that was just done and that will be top coated this year is the same as what it was. How it got there and other incremental steps from, I don't know what, you know, what the reference would be. You know, when was the last time we have an impervious number for that site? I haven't been given anything that we knew that this site was on record as having X. So all we're saying, the only reason we're bringing it up is because we were asked to bring it up, and we're saying it's just the same as what we had. So if my math is off, that's fine. I think for the record of this review, we just want to say, we're just keeping it the same. We're not adding. We were doing a siding project, and it gets added to the list that we were asked to comment on. So our main comment is that it's the same impervious areas as we found it. And that's really
Any
all the
follow-up on that?
information I have, so.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess my question would be for John. So if the site has evolved over the years, would the existing condition that we look at for impervious surface be the previously approved site plan from, boy, I'm not gonna be able to read this, but whenever this was done?
Don, what are you looking at?
I'm looking
The
at the
original.
approved site plan for SPR 204. That's in the packet. It looks like 78.
Oh,
the
this
date
is
on
the,
it.
this is the dealer, car dealership, right?
Yeah.
Subaru.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and as I'm looking at that, it looks like on the eastern side, anyway, the pavement extends closer to the brook than it does today. You know, I'm questioning whether that is like sort of the established baseline, or, you know, is the baseline 2015, you know, how do we decide that?
That's a really good question. I would have to defer to the chair on, I'm not sure, and as I think the applicant's trying to state at this point in time, that they're really before this board today for you know, the siding of the building. You know, they've presented the overall lot, and the coverage and such might be an issue that we might have to take up outside of this application, because again, there are some concerns there. Again, it looked like, as I stated before, even if we were to try and go back to the 15 plan, which is also the 15 aerials, which is also not consistent with that site plan that you just referenced. So obviously, there's been some changes done to this site without going through the site plan process. So at this point in time, I would just take the applicant's comment that we're here today about the siding. Just wanted to make them aware that this is something that we might have to have a discussion, possibly outside of this committee.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may? Sure. We do know that buildings and sites are often changed without any sort of approval by the city. I mean, that does happen occasionally. It has. And we assume, but we don't know, that they constructed it to this site plan. We would assume that it's so. We don't know how carefully the contractor or paving contractor followed the plan at the time. We just don't know. But I do take note that the application is for siting. It has nothing to do with the site plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and I think John has noted that that's, we want to focus on the siding, but I do think that we do need to address the impervious cover, especially close to the creek. All those issues, we might need to have a discussion in the future, but for now, I think siding is where we want to stick, so. That being said, any other comments, questions about the plan? All right. Yep,
Maybe,
absolutely.
Mr. Chair, just one real quick. I know that it was talked about with the rooftop units being looked at as signage. Have you gotten to a point of doing any sort of calculations yet on that for a sign permit to?
My understanding is we need to have this board's blessing that we can count them as signage, and then we're gonna work backwards from existing signage, those units, and I do wanna clarify with this group, it's our understanding we're taking one side surface area, the primary face of them, because they're a three-dimensional object, we're not counting their volume or anything like that. Our goal is to take the allowable signage, and we will work backwards from that number, deducting existing signage to remain, deducting those will be in the secondary calculation for the face area of those 5 rooftop units, and then any balance will be used in some window art that's going to be also signage. And so it was, and maybe I have this wrong, I thought we needed to agree that those would be allowed to go that way before we would submit for our sign permit.
Okay, I was just wanting to make sure
Okay.
we were
We
looking
want-
down that
we
path,
want
so.
them,
Okay.
And we're basically asking for this board to understand kind of the unique circumstance, although I point out U-Haul deliberately, that the mechanical equipment is the product, no different than a U-Haul truck is the product. And that we would like those to not have to be screened for the purposes of recognizing them as signage. They are state-of-the-art, they are very green technology. Just to give a little background, this is an all-electric product. This is, Bergeron Mechanical has focused on this technology to move away from fossil fuels. You can cut me off anytime you want. But fundamentally, this is the way that, we need that product to be visible. And it's useful, no different than it's useful to U-Haul to have all those trucks and trailers and equipment. So I think I think they're fairly benign in this location. I mean, I've seen uglier versions, where they're ground mounted in the front of a building. So there is a sign, to be very clear, there's a big arrow on the roof that says, like, this is what we're selling. But we're gonna count that in the sign permit also.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we are looking for you to say, yes, that's okay going forward, they're signs, and then we'll loop back in a different process to get our sign
Okay,
permitting.
great, thank you.
Thank you, thanks for that. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I guess I have to invite the public to comment, and that they have to state their name and address to comment, so, but nobody's here, so I'm gonna say that there are no public comments, and I will close the public comment. And now we are in board deliberation. I guess the first thing I need to do is there a motion on this request for the application? Motion to approve, sorry, yes, a motion to approve this request.
Move to approve SBR 204, is this mod 1?
Mod 3.
Mod 3, as presented.
Second. Any discussion?
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to kind of continue on the discussion about the rooftop units and signage. As the building official and zoning official, we have taken a look at this, and while rooftop, roof signage is prohibited under the zoning code, this building is, if you look at it, is unique in that there's different tiers to this roofing system, and these rooftop units are on the lower tier, so as a backdrop, they have another vertical plane of the other building behind them. So I'm not looking at these as rooftop, is because on that portion of the building, you would be able to actually, attach signage there if you wanted to on the back part of that, and the visual of these units are just that. It appeared that they are, sitting in front of that vertical plane. So again, as the zoning administrator and the sign code sits in the zoning code, I've made that determination that these could be considered signage. Just again, they will have to meet the square footage. And as has been mentioned, it would be just the front side of these units, and that's the normal calculation for whether it be, a freestanding sign or signage or projecting signs. It's really, the measurement is that one side. My only thing I would put there is that if it comes to a point of that calculations are done and not all of these units would be able to be considered part of their signage, that there would need to be screening to screen off whichever units would not be able to be part of that calculation. So that would be just a recommendation I would make to add to the motion if we would get to that point.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to thank John for the clarification, because I would have objected to this board being asked to make an interpretation of the zoning code. It has no authority to do that.
Yep. Thank you.
So would the motion to approve be conditioned on application and approval of a sign permit?
Yes, and I think that there's also, there's probably, if we look at we do have a recommended motion from staff for this, so I think we will have to add some conditions if this board were inclined to approve. We would want to make sure that that's there, and I think that, yes, that an approved sign permit be part of that motion, because that would cover that. The only problem we might want to discuss is the possibility of screening one of the units or something, just so that the applicant wouldn't have to come back to this board if it was determined that some screening had to be done. So that would be my only caution there, is if we need to discuss possible screening material, or if staff would have a recommendation on what that could or would be.
So I think that's, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I think that's it's in the background notes, and I think the applicant understands that. And B, for, Mr. Rogers to issue a permit, has to be in conformance with the code as he determines it. So I don't see that issue. My objection would have been this board being asked to interpret the zoning code.
Mr. Chair, if it turns out that they do the math and they do need to screen one or more of those units, would that be something that the department would be able to approve administratively, so they wouldn't have to come back?
So what the way that our proposed motion works and how we generally do this is, these would be conditions precedent, so they'd have to get the sign permit before this would be finalized
Right.
anyway. So that would
But
resolve that
I guess
issue.
my question is, if,
Oh.
in order to get the sign permit, they have to screen. Normally, this board would have to approve the screening materials and aesthetics, right? Would that screening be something that you could
Fair
approve
enough.
administratively?
That's a question I don't know the answer to. I don't know. Megan, do you have thoughts?
So in the recommended motion that was prepared by staff, which I will share with all board members going forward, I think that would probably be helpful, and included in the packet. But we did include either documentation demonstrating that the rooftop condensers are permitted under the sign code, or screened in accordance with section 20.6 of the Land Development Code, which addresses our screening standards. So I think that if the board decided it was appropriate to include a condition like that, it would address both the sign code and, if there were units that weren't included as part of the sign calculation, that would need to be screened. And so if you were comfortable leaving that up to the purview of staff, we could sign off on the condition as long as it met the screening requirements.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm just trying to make sure that they don't have to come back.
Yep, yep. So, yeah, if you included that in the condition, we would make sure that they were screened, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, do I need to withdraw my motion?
I believe so. You can amend, yeah, withdraw and
All right,
amend, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend my motion.
If I
ahead.
may, prior to amending a motion, I would also probably, we might want to clarify a little bit from the applicant's comments about the site diagram, that we understand that this is not a site plan, that the actual still original site plan for this property would still be the one from 1978, that this is not a, even though it's being, referenced as a site plan or a proposed condition plan, that's not the intent of this document in here. So I just want to make it very clear that this is not part of the modification that's being done to the overall site plan. If
Thank you,
that
John.
makes any sense.
No, that actually makes a ton of sense. And I think, I think, sort of in that direction, one of the proposed conditions, if we choose to accept it, is in reference to impervious surface. And that gets at that question or that point about this is not a site plan. This is a modification of an existing site plan. So just, I don't know if that's where that was headed, but that's where I wanted to.
Isn't it enough just to go back to the original application, which is to change the siding? And everything else is peripheral?
But we do need to address it in this situation with respect to the sign, with respect to the impervious surface. Those need to be addressed.
Not to be argumentative, but this has nothing to do with the impervious surface. They're changing the siding.
It's obviously up to the board. If you want to take it out, you're more than welcome. Yeah.
I'm not the maker of the motion. It's up to the maker of the motion, but that's just my
Yep.
point of view, as obstructive as I can be.
Nope, I appreciate that.
So, in the light of trying to find a way forward here, I would think that they have an approved site plan from 70 whatever. If the planning department, community development department finds that they're not in compliance with that site plan, wouldn't that be a separate matter that you could then address with the applicant?
Yes,
So can we leave it out if that's matter?
yes.
Good. Are we ready for a motion?
Go ahead.
Move that the Minor Projects Committee approve SPR 204 Mod 3 for changes to architectural and visual appearance as shown on the site plan and identified as permit set 216 Marlborough Street, Keene, New Hampshire, 03431. Parcel ID, really, Megan? Parcel ID? 58901600000, prepared by Randall Walter at a scale of 1 inch equals 40 feet on January 4th, 2023, and on the elevations identified as existing conditions, 216 Marlborough Street, Keene, New Hampshire, 03431, parcel ID 58901600000, prepared by Randall Walter at a scale of 1/8 inch equals 1 foot on August 8th, 2022, with the following conditions precedent prior to signature by the Minor Projects Review Committee Chair. 1. Property owner signature appears on the site plan. 2, submittal of 5 full-size copies and 1 digital copy of the site plan and color elevations. 3, submittal of a revised site plan showing the extent of the impervious area on the site. That's the one out. Okay, that is included in your recommendation. Sorry, I'm getting off script. Submittal of a revised site plan showing the extent of the impervious area on the site, the zoning district, the lot coverage calculations, the location of the access aisle for the accessible parking space, site features, and the location of 5 rooftop condenser units on the building. 4, submittal of documentation to demonstrate that the proposed rooftop condensers are either permitted under the sign code or screened in accordance with section 20.6 of the Land Development Code.
If I may, Mr. Chair, before seconds, I would make a recommendation that we actually, item number 3 that was part of that motion, that actually be reduced to show to remove the impervious area on the site from that part of the motion, and that we still would need to see the correct zoning district, because this plan is showing this in the BGR, and it's actually in the neighborhood business district. And then also showing the accessible parking and the rooftop condensers would be fine, but I think removing the extent of the impervious area at this point in time for this application from that motion.
Do we need to make Don read that all over again?
Please, no.
If he's okay with that, then I would second that motion minus that
I
sentence.
think it's a fabulous idea.
Second.
Thank you. With that second, any other discussion or edits? All right, seeing none, I guess we need a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Process-wise, 5 sets with his signature to you?
Yep, so the way
Okay.
that it will work now is I will send you a letter that outlines all those conditions that they just went through.
The amended
The
conditions?
amended conditions, yep. And then, it'll be 5 copies of the site plan that are signed by Kim, and then the elevations should be signed by you as well, just because that's
Okay.
technically what they're approving.
That's fine.
And then, the other 2 conditions that my mind is already drawing a blank on, and once those have all been addressed.
The sign permit,
Yes,
we'll
sign
work on
permit,
that.
Yes. Then the application will come back to the board for a final vote, which you don't have to be present for. And that point, that's when you would have Jesse sign the final plans and elevations, and you would get your final approval. Just
Okay.
as long as all of those conditions are met. So, I should send you the letter probably later today, I would say.
I want to thank you all very much for working with us. I appreciate you being a part of this community and this town.
For what it's worth, I think it looks funky as hell, and I love it. It looks great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
The goal is to come from the mountains and go to the fields and just be,
That said, you should never take aesthetic advice from an engineer, but I think it looks great.
okay,
We're hearing from others that it's popular, so
thank you.
it's a one of one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate this.
Thank you.
Good day.
So, the next item on the agenda is the Minor Project Review Committee schedule for 2023. We've had to make a little change here, and I will try to explain why as best I can with support from Megan and John. So, right now, our schedule is to have 2 monthly meetings, generally holding the second meeting on an as-needed basis. However, through closer reading of the Land Development Code, it turns out that through the creation of the Minor Project Review Committee, the pre-submission meeting that is required of all applicants for site plans falls under our purview and is therefore a public meeting. And so our solution to the fact that if we held the current, look at him when you shake your head.
That was a public meeting?
Well, we'll see how this goes. So, currently, the pre-submission meeting needs to be noticed to the public, and it needs to have a note taker and all of that stuff. That currently is a Wednesday morning meeting once a month. And what we're proposing is to bring that pre-submission meeting into our current meeting schedule. So twice a month, people who have pre-submission applications would come to this meeting, and we would have our pre-submission discussion with them at that meeting. Since we are the body that sits to review that. Looks like John's got.
I just have a
Yeah.
quick question on that, which I understand that we've discussed this quite a bit, just popped to my head a little bit is the number of people I see sitting around a pre-submission meeting table and the number of people I see sitting here aren't the same.
Yes.
So there's certainly some missing representation. So would the additional staff be invited to those meetings to speak when we have a pre-submission, something on the agenda that is a pre-submission pre-submission application, so that we could have police, and if we had to have other people from Public Works speaking, or if we had to have other people from the Community Development Department to speak, they'd be speaking as staff from the audience. Is that how that
Yes,
would be?
that's how that would, I think that's how that would work, although you're, now that you say that, since the way we're gonna handle this is, this means that the first and second, this meeting will happen, both these meetings will happen every month, we'll need to be here. That means that police and the other members who are, of the pre-submission meeting who are not on this board will just have to make this a standing meeting on their schedule as well. So I hadn't contemplated that. Yeah, go ahead, Megan.
I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Chair, that the second monthly meeting, so at the first monthly meeting, we are going to have time for people to walk in and receive advice and comment from the board, since it is your responsibility as board members. For the second monthly meeting, we're not necessarily going to hold it unless we have a continued public hearing, or we have someone who has requested specifically to come to the meeting for advice and comments. So it's not necessarily always a given that there's going to be that second meeting. The first one is walk-ins, the second meeting would be for scheduled pre-submission inquiries only.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Megan.
I have a comment, but it'll be later.
Uh-oh.
All right, well, I have a comment, Mr. Chair, and it'll be now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the benefit and the value in the pre-submission meeting is it's an informal opportunity for applicants to talk to staff as they're preparing their applications before they submitted it, right, by definition. I think turning it into essentially a public hearing in front of a formal committee where minutes are kept and what have you, and I'm all for transparency, don't get me wrong, but I think we're going to lose the real value of the pre-submission meeting.
Point taken. Unfortunately, and this is part of the discussion we've been having as staff. Unfortunately, the way the land development code is written, because the members of the pre-submission meeting are either on this board right now or are the alternates for, or the alternate.
We create a public meeting
We create a
by
public
have-
meeting
yeah.
by creating quorum. Yeah, so.
So I volunteer not to show up to the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's the solution, is we all just send our
It doesn't matter
delegates.
because they could end up having to sit in this meeting. And so
Why would that be? I don't have an alternate.
that's fair, but you're one of these people. So I have an alternate who's there all the time.
That's your problem.
No, that's just how it goes. You have an alternate who's at
Yeah, but
every,
my alternate does not attend the pre-submission meetings. My alternate's Court. Yelma attends the pre-submission meetings.
I think you need to rethink this a little bit. Maybe you shouldn't be talking to vampires.
no,
If I may, I mean, it certainly is something to look at. It would, require the reorganization of a pre-submission team as so, and whether or not, again, as far as like with the fire chief, I'm not sure who the chief's alternate is, but that could become a little bit problematic, because I'm going to assume that it would either be, one of the captains or one of the lieutenants. And I just don't know if at what level that you would lose some of that expertise at the pre-submission meeting if you don't have the right people on that team. That's the only cautionary tale. If we go too far down the line to get somebody that wouldn't be an alternate, then would you be losing the benefit of the pre-submission meeting because there's just not good information being given out to the applicant?
And we can still have some members of this board in that meeting. We just can't have a quorum, right? And a quorum for this board is, I thought it was 4. It's 4. So three of us could be in the pre-submission meeting, just not a fourth.
So, Med is correct that I spoke with the attorney, and the issue there is if we head down a road where we're skirting the rules just to avoid making it a public meeting, that can become problematic. That being said, I think we can explore the idea of making sure that no one who sits in pre-submission is either an alternate or would be asked to, because there's the designee, right? And then there's alternates. So, you know, I have a designee, John has a designee, but then if we're both out and the designees are out, we can have an alternate sit in our seat here. And so you begin to, as you said, you start working down that ladder of responsibility, and we're all connected to this. So,
Not to interrupt, but I think Don's right.
okay, I gotcha. I'm telling you that I disagree. And I think the other problem is that the LDC explicitly says that the pre-submission meeting is the responsibility of the minor project review committee. That they're tied. So we're sort of stuck in this position of, okay, who's attending the meeting, and also this is our responsibility. It is created as a extension of us, or this board, I shouldn't say us. So that's where we're stuck. You know, we can leave this open to more discussion, but I think right now we're in a little bit of peril with respect to the purpose of the pre-submission meeting and the whether we're taking notes, because we've absolutely had the discussion of the point of the pre-submission meeting is to be informal,
Right.
and that this is not that space.
I mean, today we saw here, you know, that Randall Walter is a pretty experienced applicant, right? He knows our system, and he walked in, and you could tell he was surprised by the formality and it's a different context.
Yeah.
I think we're losing something.
Right, John.
If I may, Mr. Chair, is there, maybe it's a, you know, conversation we would have to have with the city attorney, but I'm just curious if ultimately, you know, we'd be holding almost two different meetings. You know, we'd be having the actual applications in front of us for a minor project that would go through this format that we have that we had today. Is there any possibility of, from that point in time, if we moved, you know, if we heard those applicants and then moved into a pre-submission type application, could we actually change the format a little bit to make it that it's a little bit more, not quite as formal at that point in time? Just to throw it out there, because I certainly agree with, you know, being a little more informal tends to put people at a little bit ease, and you know, some people are already nervous walking through the doors to speak to us to begin with, and adding that anxiety could be problematic at times. So
I don't see why we couldn't, and I actually don't. You know, I leave this to all of you who've been here longer. I'm not sure why we have to meet in this room at all. We could have all of our meetings in the adjoining.
the main reason at this point in time really is for the minute taker. Why we're
Gotcha.
having them in here is because of the
'Cause of
remote minute
right.
takers and the recording happening. Is really the main reason for this
Right.
for this room.
Gotcha.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I believe it's also because these meeting recordings, as this is a subcommittee of the planning board, or not subcommittee, but a committee was created by the planning board.
Spawn of the planning board.
Yes, please make sure you include the word spawn in the official minutes, Britta, thank you. I think our intent is to have these recordings posted on the city website, because any decisions that are made by this board or committee are appealable.
Right.
So having that transparency to the public. And so obviously we don't have the same setup in the second floor council, or we're in council chambers in the second floor conference room as we do in this room. So just a little additional clarification.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we could probably come up with a way to make this space more informal. I don't exactly know. Unbutton your top button before you
Bagels
start
and cream
discussing.
cheese?
Bagels and cream cheese
It-
for pre-submission.
Is there an opportunity to correct the underlying problem where the code makes that meeting an appendage of its board?
We could look into that. I'm not 100% sure how that, well, I guess, Megan, one second, but yes, you probably have the answer. yes, we could. It would require us modifying the LDC, which would take time. So the question is what we do in the intervening time. Go ahead, Megan, sorry.
I'm sorry to keep interjecting. So we had discussed in the past making this a correction to the LDC that just, would strike through that section that gives the board the responsibility of reviewing pre-submission inquiries. It comes down to the issue of the fact that we would still have a quorum of minor project review committee members if it was handled as a separate meeting, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only real solution is to enshrine the members of the pre-submission meeting and try to ensure that they are not at all related to the folks on the minor project review committee, I guess that's the only way that I could see us being able to keep these two things separate.
And that would work for the Public Works representative, but it may be more difficult for code enforcement or fire or police, I don't know.
But you still evade the quorum issue potentially.
Yeah.
You know, one of the advantages of the informal meeting is it's not all about the planning process, and it's not all about this is a substitute to the planning board.
Right.
You know, it gives the fire chief to talk about fire code requirements. It gives John an opportunity to talk about what you're gonna need for a building permit. I mean, it's less targeted. That's why it's so informal. It's recognizing that someone has an idea or a project in mind and getting informal advice on how to advance that project.
Understood. There's the intent, and then there's the reality of operating in New Hampshire. And so I feel like we can, and I think I recognize absolutely the concern, and I agree, and that was my reaction at first. And so I think we can direct staff to go back and try and figure out if there's a way to identify a way forward by codifying who is in who is in the pre-submission meeting. I think that's a potential way forward. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, the item that we're discussing is the schedule. Regardless of whether the pre-submission meeting becomes part of its board's purview, is there any reason we couldn't approve this meeting schedule and ask that the chair continue deliberations with the city attorney? Or better yet, not with the city attorney? And
only.
finding a better alternative than having this be the steering, or the pre-submission meeting.
I think we can do that, although I will go back to Megan and just check. This is the same schedule as before. It was just this asterisk note at the bottom that changes the schedule, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So
Okay.
it's the same meeting schedule, just on the first and third Thursdays of the month instead of the second and fourth. And then really we were gonna handle the minor project, or not the minor project session, the pre-submission portion of the meeting by just adding it as a standing agenda item. So adopting the calendar won't affect the pre-submission
But-
and whether or not we include it as part of the meeting.
But the dates are different.
The
than-
dates are
than what
different
was
because it
previously
is,
approved.
yes.
It was,
We're
okay.
switching from the second and fourth to the first and third.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
Okay, then in that case, I guess the options are to, well, I guess, do I have to,
I would make a motion to approve the amended 2023 meeting schedule.
Second,
So if we don't approve it, what happens?
then our next meeting would be on February 9th instead of February 2nd.
Be the following year, right?
oh, if only. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. If we don't approve it, we just go on with the schedule as is now. Yeah,
If I may, just also, I think, and I will certainly let Megan correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think that the change to the dates was also to kind of align a little bit better and give people a little bit more time possibly prior to, from pre-submission to actually application deadlines. This gives us a little bit more wiggle room. So I think regardless of where we land with this pre-submission versus this committee, I think that the changes to the date are beneficial to both staff and for applicants.
Yeah, and to be clear, I have no issue at all with changing the schedule. My concern is about turning this into a pre-submission.
absolutely. Okay. In that case, I guess a point of clarification, if we accept this motion, are we accepting, we're not accepting the change to including the pre-submission as part of this meeting?
Just
Perfect.
changing the schedule.
Yep, just wanted to make sure. Okay, if we're ready for a vote?
I think we need a second.
Oh, we need a second, yes.
No,
I-
Don-
I already
Don-
seconded.
Don did
Oh,
second,
okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
In that case, all those in favor of changing the schedule?
Amen.
Aye.
Aye. All right, it's unanimous. All right, thank you very much for the discussion. And then just want to, last item on the agenda, upcoming dates. Oh, boy, now I have to make sure, are the upcoming dates reflected in the
Yes.
new schedule? All right.
Awfully
So,
presumptuous of the staff.
Me if I didn't have my stuff together enough to have the right dates on there. and you're thinking it was-
Correct. Very astute.
just upcoming meeting dates. So now the new meeting date will be February 2nd, which is next week. So we get to all gather again next week. Great.
What time?
10 a.m.
I don't know if I'll be here. Just,
Okay. Do you have an alternate? You do, because
I
you're,
don't have an alternate.
but you're standing in for the city manager, so the city manager will need to
I'm
identify.
appointed the city manager, not standing.
Sorry, yes, fair enough, appointed by the city manager.
I
She'll
still
have to
haven't seen
appoint
that
an
paperwork.
alternate, right? Or hang out with us at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, so. Yeah. February 2nd, 10 a.m., and then the next meeting after that will be February 16th, if needed due to continued public hearing or pre-submission inquiry. Although that is up for discussion, and I will move forward with that discussion and let you all know where it goes. I guess that's, unless there's anything else, we can adjourn. All right, thanks, everybody.